The tomatoes were ready before I was. That is what I remember thinking on that Tuesday morning in late September, standing in the backyard my wife and I had planted together 41 years ago. The garden was full, red and heavy. She always said tomatoes were patient. They just kept growing, no matter what was happening inside the house. Inside the house, a lot had been happening. My son-in-law had sent me a text 3 weeks earlier. I had read it so many times I could recite it from memory without even looking at my phone. He wrote, "Mr. Alderman, we appreciate everything you've done, but my wife needs space to build her own life. Your visits are making her anxious. We're asking you to give us some distance for a while." He signed it with his name. Not "your family." Not "we love you." Just his name. Like a letter from an attorney. My daughter had not sent me anything. That was the part I could not stop chewing on, even as I stood there in the morning. Cool, even as the dog nosed around the base of the tomato cages, looking for whatever dogs look for at 7 in the morning. My daughter had not sent me one word. Not a correction. Not a "Dad, I'm sorry, he didn't mean it like that." Nothing. She had let her husband speak for her, and she had stayed quiet, and in that quiet I heard everything I needed to hear. Her name is Joelle. She is 34 years old. She has her mother's cheekbones and her grandfather's stubbornness, and for the first 28 years of her life she was my best friend in the world. Then she married Cormac. I want to be fair to him. I have tried to be fair to him. I have tried to be fair to him from the beginning. When Joelle first brought him home to meet me, it was Thanksgiving 4 years ago now. I shook his hand and I meant it. He had a firm grip. He looked me in the eye. He said he had heard so much about me. I thought, good start. I genuinely thought that. The first sign came about 6 months in. Small, easy to explain away. They needed help with first and last month's rent on an apartment in Phoenix. Joelle had just changed jobs. Cormac was doing something with online marketing which I never fully understood and which seemed to require a lot of expensive equipment and very little consistent income. I wrote the check, $4,200. I did not make a speech about it. I did not ask for anything in return. I was her father. That is what fathers do. The second sign came a year after that. Cormac had an opportunity, he said, a business partner, a digital branding agency. He needed seed money to buy into the partnership. He needed $15,000. Joelle called me on a Sunday evening and explained it very carefully, in that voice she uses when she already knows the answer is yes and is just going through the formality of asking. I loved that voice once. It used to mean she wanted to go to a baseball game or borrow the car for a road trip. I said yes. Again. I told myself it was an investment in their future. I told myself Cormac was ambitious, and ambition is not a character flaw. I told myself a lot of things on the drive home from the bank where I wired the money. I was good at telling myself things back then. The third sign I cannot explain away, and I stopped trying to. It was my granddaughter's 5th birthday. Her name is Wren. Joelle picked it. Said she always loved the sound of it, small and quick like the bird. And I had driven 4 hours from Tucson to Phoenix to be there for the party. I brought the tricycle Wren had been asking about for 2 months. Pink, with a little basket on the front and streamers on the handlebars. I had spent 45 minutes in the store making sure I had the right one. I arrived and Cormac met me at the door. He said Joelle was not feeling well. He said the party had been scaled back. He said it was probably not a good time for a long visit. He was standing in the doorway while he said these things, not stepping aside, not inviting me in, holding the door at a 45-degree angle, like I was a salesman whose pitch he had already decided to decline. I could hear Wren inside. I could hear her laughing at something. I stood on the porch of the house I had helped them with the down payment on $30,000, drawn from the retirement account I had spent 30 years building. and I held a pink tricycle, and my son-in-law told me it was not a good time. I left the tricycle on the porch. I drove home. I did not cry until I hit the I-10, and then I cried for about 20 miles, and then I stopped, because crying on the highway is a good way to end up dead, and I still had reasons to stay alive. Ren, primarily, but also the dog, also the tomatoes. That night, I called my brother. His name is Seamus, and he is 2 years older than me, and has been telling me the hard truth about things since we were children, sharing a room in our parents' house in Flagstaff. I told him everything: the tricycle, the doorway, the text from Cormac, the silence from Joelle. Seamus listened. When I was done, he said, "She's letting him run the whole show, isn't she?" It was not a question. "I think so," I said, "and you're still financing the show." I did not answer that one. "Theodore," he said, "he's the only person left on earth who calls me by my full name. You need to stop." I knew he was right. I had known he was right for a while. Knowing something is right and doing it are two entirely different muscles, and mine were very weak in that particular area. I had spent 30 years being a provider. My wife passed 8 years ago, pancreatic cancer, 7 weeks from diagnosis to the end, fast and brutal, and still the worst thing I have ever survived. And after she was gone, the providing had become the only language I had left for love. If I could not be present the way she had been present, at least I could write the check. At least I could make the financial fear go away. At least I could be useful. Cormac had understood that about me before I understood it about myself. I see that now. He had mapped the terrain. He knew exactly where I was soft. I did not stop right away. I want to be honest about that. After the birthday porch incident, I still answered when Joelle called. There were 2 more requests in the following 8 months. One was $1,200 for car repairs. One was $3,000 for medical bills that I later found out, through a comment my daughter let slip on the phone, were related to a weekend trip to Las Vegas that Cormac had framed to me as a work conference. I paid them both, and then Cormac sent the text about Joel needing space, and something in me went very still. Not angry. Not right away. Just still. The way a room goes still when someone walks out of it, and you are left standing there realizing you have been talking to an empty chair. I did not respond to his text for 4 days. I sat with it. I read it in the morning. I read it before bed. I took the dog on long walks and thought about it. I pulled weeds in the garden and thought about it. And on the 4th day, very early, before the sun was all the way up, I called my accountant and told him I needed to make some changes. His name is Fenwick. He's been doing my taxes for 17 years and has the patient demeanor of a man who has heard every financial disaster a human being can engineer for themselves. He did not flinch at what I told him I wanted to do. He just wrote it down and said he would make some calls. Then I called my attorney. Her name is Margot. She is in her 50s, practical as a wrench, and charges $450 an hour. Worth every cent. I told her what I had given Joelle and Cormac over the past 4 years. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "All right, what do you want the next chapter to look like?" I liked that framing. The next chapter. "I want to protect Ren," I said. "Everything else is secondary." "Then let's start there," she said. "The thing people do not understand about cutting off financial support is that it does not have to be about punishment." I was not trying to punish Joelle. I was not trying to punish Cormac, although I will be honest and say that was harder. What I was trying to do was stop building their ceiling with my own hands. Every dollar I gave them was a dollar that said, "You do not have to figure this out. You do not have to be uncomfortable. You do not have to grow." I was so afraid of watching my daughter struggle that I had taken away her ability to stand up straight. I had done it with love, but I had done it. Margot drew up the trust on a Wednesday afternoon in October. The central piece was simple. I liquidated the investment account I'd built over 20 years. Not my retirement, but a separate account, a nest egg on top of the nest egg, something my wife and I used to call the someday money for someday, when we did not know what someday was yet. It was substantial, $230,000. Every cent of it went into an irrevocable trust for Ren. The terms were structured. Ren gets a portion of 25 for education expenses only. Tuition, books, room and board, nothing else. A trustee I appointed, my brother Seamus, has to approve the disbursements. She gets access to the remainder at 32. Not 30. Not 21. 32. That was deliberate. I know who I was at 30. I know who I was at 32. Different person. 32 is the age when you have started making your real mistakes and lived with the consequences long enough to learn something from them. Neither Joel nor Cormac is named anywhere in the document. Margot asked me twice if I was certain. I told her the same thing both times. I picked up the pen. I signed it. The scratch of a pen in a quiet office is a very particular sound. It is the sound of something becoming permanent. I did not feel relief immediately. I felt the weight of it, the grief of it. Signing that paper meant accepting that things had broken in a way that required legal architecture to contain them. No father wants to reach that conclusion about his own family. But I had sat in enough ruin already to know the difference between a building that could be repaired and one where the foundation was compromised. You do not patch a compromised foundation. You clear the ground and start again. I also did something else that Margot gently advised against, and I did it anyway. I stopped sending money. Full stop. Cold. The automatic transfer of $800 a month that I had set up 2 years earlier, framed at the time as help with the mortgage, maintained long after the original reason had expired. I cancelled it on a Thursday morning from my kitchen table, coffee going cold next to the laptop, the dog asleep on the mat by the back door. Cormac called that same Thursday evening. I did not answer. He called twice more over the following week. I did not answer those either. Joelle called on a Sunday. I answered that one because she is my daughter and I will always answer for my daughter no matter what. She did not ask about the money directly. That is not how Joelle communicates. She talked around things. She mentioned they were having a stressful month. She mentioned that some of Cormac's accounts had fallen through. She mentioned that Ren's preschool tuition was due. She said it all in a voice that was very careful and very controlled, and underneath the control I could hear something I had not heard from her in years. She was scared. I hear that things are hard right now, I said. Dad, a pause. We could really use some help. I know, I said. Another pause, longer this time. Are you going to help us? I looked out the window at the garden. The tomatoes had all been picked by then. The vines were drying out. Fall was doing what fall does. I'm going to help Ren, I said. I've set something up for her. Something permanent. Something she'll have no matter what. But I'm not going to keep sending money to the household account, Joel. I can't keep doing that. The silence on her end lasted long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Cormac said you'd do this, she finally said. What did he say I'd do? That you'd use the money to control us. I breathed. Carefully. I'm not using it to control you. I'm letting go of it. I'm giving it to your daughter, and I'm stepping back from your finances entirely. That's the opposite of control. It doesn't feel like that. I know, I said. I'm sorry, it doesn't feel like that. She hung up before I did. I sat at the kitchen table for a while after. The dog came over and put his head on my knee, which he does when he senses something is wrong. I scratched his ears. I thought about Joel at 7 years old, refusing to go to sleep without a glass of water, and a specific stuffed rabbit she called Buckle, and how I used to carry that rabbit everywhere in my jacket pocket, just in case she needed it. I thought about her at 17 when she decided she wanted to be a marine biologist and spent 6 months reading every ocean book she could find before quietly moving on to the next thing. I thought about her at her mother's bedside in that hospital room, 26 years old, holding her mother's hand and not looking away. She was still that person. I had to believe she was still that person. She was just lost right now in a version of her life that someone else was narrating for her. The following months were the hardest I had experienced since my wife died. Not in the same way. Grief for a person and grief for a relationship are different animals, but in the same territory. The particular loneliness of loving someone who is not available to be loved right now. I stayed busy. I was good at staying busy. I expanded the garden. I finally repaired the fence along the back property line that I had been meaning to fix for 3 years. I took a woodworking class at the community center on Tuesday evenings, a class full of retired men who did not talk very much, but were very focused on their dovetail joints, which I found genuinely soothing. In December, my daughter called again. By this point, Cormac's digital branding agency had apparently dissolved. I learned this not from Joel, but from a mutual family friend who had seen something on social media. He was back to doing freelance work, irregular and poorly paid. They had fallen behind on the mortgage on the house that my $30,000 had helped them get into. The bank had sent them a notice. Joelle called on a Tuesday night. She said she needed to tell me something and she needed me to just listen first before I said anything. I told her, okay. She talked for 20 minutes about the agency, about the Vegas trip she had not known about until after, which turned out to be 2 trips, which turned out to involve a level of gambling debt she had only recently discovered the full scope of, about the way she had told herself for 2 years that she was managing it, about the way she had let Cormac manage the information she received about their own finances, about the birthday party, she brought it up herself without me asking, and how she had not been sick that day. She had just been afraid of what I would see if I came inside. I kept my promise. I listened. All the way through. When she finished, she said, I think I need to get out. I know, I said. I don't have a lot of options right now. I know that too. I heard her breath catch. The guest room is yours, I said. You and Ren, for as long as you need. She drove down the following Saturday morning with Ren in the back seat and 2 suitcases in the trunk. I was standing in the driveway when they pulled up. Ren got out of the car before it had fully stopped, the way 5-year-olds do, and she ran across the driveway and hit me around the knees and said, Grandpa, do you still have the dog? With the absolute urgency of someone asking about a thing they had been worried about for the entire 4-hour drive. The dog was very much still there. I am not a man who cries easily. I managed it this time. Joelle got out of the car slowly. She looked thin. She looked like someone who had not been sleeping well. She looked like my daughter, which is to say, she looked like someone I would walk through fire for, without needing to think about it first. She stood by the car and looked at me, and I could see she did not know what to say. The tomatoes are done, I said. But I've got a good soup on the stove. She laughed. It was a small laugh, watery at the edges, but it was real. She crossed the driveway, and I put my arms around her, and she let me, which was the most important thing that had happened in a long time. Cormac did not come. I did not expect him to. The divorce was filed in February. Joelle handled it with the kind of focused, furious competence she had always been capable of and rarely deployed in the right direction. She hired a good attorney. She documented everything, the debt, the hidden accounts, the pattern of financial decisions made without her knowledge or consent. The final settlement was not generous to Cormac. It was not designed to be. He tried to contact me twice during the process, once by text, once by voicemail. In the text he said he hoped we could have a man-to-man conversation and clear the air. In the voicemail he said he had always respected me and hoped I understood that what happened was complicated. I did not respond to either. There was nothing complicated about it. He had spent 4 years taking my money and 4 years managing my access to my own daughter and grandchild. The air between us was as clear as it was going to get. Wren started kindergarten in the fall at the public school 6 blocks from my house. On the first day, she wore a dress with sunflowers on it and a backpack shaped like an owl that she had picked out herself. I walked her to school. She held my hand the whole way, which she will probably not do much longer, so I paid attention to it. When we got to the classroom door, she stopped and looked up at me very seriously and said, "Grandpa, don't be sad when you go home." I told her I would try my best. She seemed satisfied with that. She went in. I stood outside the school for a moment before I turned to walk back. The air was cool. The sky was doing that thing it does in Arizona in the fall, where it goes a particular shade of blue that I have never seen replicated anywhere else. A blue so specific and deep it looks like it was painted by someone who really cared about getting it right. I thought about my wife. I thought about how much she would have loved Wren. I thought about all the years between now and the day Wren turns 32 and opens a letter from a trustee and learns that her grandfather had been saving something for her this whole time. I hoped I would be around to see it. I planned to be. Back at the house, Joelle was already at the kitchen table with her laptop and a cup of coffee, applying for positions at the environmental non-profit she had always been interested in and never pursued because Cormac had discouraged the low salary. She had the look she gets when she is working, the cheekbone-set look. Her mother's look. "How'd she do?" Joelle asked without looking up. "Walked right in," I said. "Didn't look back." Joelle smiled at her screen. "Good." I got myself coffee and stood at the kitchen window and looked at the garden. In the spring, I was going to expand it again. Wren had already informed me that she wanted to grow strawberries and that she wanted her own section with her name on a little sign and that the sign needed to be painted red, not green. I had told her all of that was entirely manageable. The fence along the back property line was solid now, fixed right. It would stand for a long time. I have made many mistakes as a father. I made them with love, which is how most parenting mistakes get made, but they were mistakes nonetheless. I provided when I should have stepped back. I wrote checks when I should have asked questions. I told myself that removing discomfort from my daughter's life was the same thing as caring for her, and it took losing access to that daughter entirely before I understood the difference. Money is not love. It looks like love sometimes from a distance, especially when you are a man who does not always know how to say the actual words. But it is not the same thing. One of them builds something, the other one just keeps the lights on, and when the lights go out, you are left in the dark wondering where everyone went. I learned that lesson later than I should have. I am learning the rest of it now, one day at a time, in a house that has a child's drawings on the refrigerator and dog hair on the sofa and the smell of something decent cooking most evenings. The tomatoes will be back in the spring. I intend to be here for them. I keep thinking about the tricycle I left on the porch. Not about Cormac blocking the door. Not about the text, or the wired money, or the $30,000 that went into a down payment on a house I was never made to feel welcome in. I keep thinking about that pink tricycle with the streamers on the handlebars, sitting on the porch of a house I helped buy, in front of a door that did not open for me. That image has more to say about what went wrong than anything I could put into words. What I understand now, that I did not understand then, is that cause and effect does not take a break for people you love. You do not get to opt out of consequences just because your intentions were good. I gave Joelle everything she asked for, and in doing so, I quietly taught her that asking was enough. That discomfort was something that could always be removed by a phone call to Dad. That the gap between wanting something and earning it was a gap I would fill. When Cormac arrived in her life, he did not create that lesson. He just knew how to use it. The hardest thing I ever had to reckon with was that I had a hand in building the problem. Not all of it, But enough. A man who writes enough checks without asking enough questions is not being generous. He is being afraid. I was afraid of watching my daughter struggle the way I had struggled in my 20s. Afraid she would think I had failed her. Afraid of being the kind of father who let his kid fall. So I caught her every time. I caught her so consistently that she forgot falling was survivable. What Joe had to find, and what I could not give her, was the particular kind of strength that only comes from navigating your own wreckage. Not borrowed strength, not cushioned strength. The kind that forms in your character the way calluses form on your hands, slowly, and only because something hard was there to push back. She found it. I watched her find it, from a careful distance, and it was one of the more painful and more beautiful things I have witnessed in my life. There is a version of integrity that I think gets overlooked. It is not the dramatic kind. It is the kind that shows up on a Tuesday when you do not want to, when the work is not interesting, and no one is watching, and the paycheck is modest, and the future is unclear. That is the version Joel had to build from scratch after years of not needing it. She built it. That is not a small thing. And then there is the matter of the mind, of paying attention to what is actually happening, instead of what you have decided is happening. I missed signals for 4 years because I chose comfortable explanations over honest ones. Joelle did the same for longer. The moment she started looking clearly at her own situation, without the story Cormac had been writing for her, everything changed. Clarity is not comfortable, but it is the only foundation that holds. I signed that trust document for Wren because I wanted her to have something real, not a shortcut, not a cushion. A foundation she could stand on at 32 when she knows who she is and what she is made of. The tomatoes will come back in spring. I will be here, so will she.